Just recently, the One Piece anime finally began the long-awaited final saga of this nearly 3-decade-long journey, and to mark the occasion, to mark this landmark shift in the story, a new opening was dropped upon the world. And to put it as mildly as I can, this may very well be the greatest opening to an anime that I have ever seen in my entire goddamn life. And there's a reason for that. If you've seen the opening yourself, you're probably wondering, how? How on earth does something this incredible even exist? And why aren't Toei doing it for all of the other openings too? How does something like this get made? And the answer, much like everything else in the anime industry, comes down to creators. It's not popularity, it's not budget, they don't literally throw cash into these computers to make these anime, it all comes down to the artists and the craftsmen that are helming these projects. Or in this case, maybe I should say, craftswomen. A few years ago, I made a video about the legendary, spectacular, immaculate episode 1015 of One Piece. The episode that I think most people will agree is the greatest episode that has aired in the history of One Piece's entire run. This episode is absolute perfection in every possible way, and the main reason that it was perfection was because of a director named Megumi Ishitani. Now, this being years later, I'm pretty sure most people already know who Megumi Ishitani is by now, but in the off chance that you don't, she is basically an absolute prodigy in directorial talent and got her start under the mentorship of people within Toei. She ended up being so good at her job that she got her official director debut on the series finale of Dragon Ball Super, and then she went on to direct 3 of the most beloved and well-crafted episodes of One Piece, ironically becoming one of the most well-known anime directors in the community without a single actual big project under her name. And it's this talent, Megumi Ishitani, who has just brought us arguably the crown jewel of her portfolio of work so far. To call this opening well-directed would be an understatement and offense that I would goddamn slap myself for. This is a masterpiece of such proportions that I honestly don't even know exactly where to begin describing it. The color choices and aesthetic, the unbelievable flow from shot to shot, the sheer genius in the ideas and details and symbolism that are scattered across this entire thing. I mean, who thinks of shots like this? Who thinks of having the Vegapunks appear as a video game selection screen on top of his head? Who thinks of having these 5 different fights overlapping into one continuous shot? Who thinks of showing the Straw Hats literally walking across the arcs of the series with their outfits changing in real time to the respective environment below them as a way of visualizing them literally entering this final saga? Ishitani is just unparalleled as a mastermind of not only conceptualizing these incredible strokes of art, but actually having the skill and the ability to bring them to life. And that brings us to another side of Ishitani that is just as important when it comes to how alive all of her works end up feeling, and how goddamn excellent this opening is. And that is her ability as a storyboard artist. Now, if you don't know what that means, imagine storyboards like the pre-visualization of what the final product will be. You're not actually animating all of these final scenes, but you're drawing key images that tell animators what those scenes are ultimately supposed to look like. You're showing them how those shots are framed, you're showing them how the characters move within them, you're showing how the camera moves within them, and it ultimately determines what a scene is actually going to look like. The animation can be as good as it wants, but without a good storyboard, without a good visualization of what these scenes are actually going to end up being, you're still going to end up with scenes that ultimately end up looking pretty flat and don't have any flow. But when you do have a good storyboard, that is when the animation truly shines. And that is where another one of Megumi Ishitani's unrivaled talents really shows itself. Even before this opening came out, Ishitani's storyboards were a talent of hers that always made itself apparent in the episodes that she was in charge of. She's just a creator that clearly understands what makes animation look good. The way these shots are composed, the way that scenes transition from one to the next, the meticulous detail in color and lighting, it's all masterfully done in a way that feels intrinsically tied to who Ishitani is as a creator. And it's all stuff that you can see down to her very storyboards. I don't know how to tell you guys this, but storyboards do not usually look like this, especially for TV anime, and especially for a weekly long-running series like One Piece. These are exceptionally rare things to see in a storyboard, and it really shows you how important this craft is to her. If she knows how she wants her scenes lit, she draws it in the storyboard. If she knows how she wants her scenes colored, she draws it in the storyboard. If she knows the exact direction that she wants a single feather falling into frame, well, you better goddamn believe that she drew that into the storyboard. However, it's with opening 26 specifically, this absolute spectacle of the Egghead arc, where I genuinely think Ishitani has surpassed all of her previous storyboarding work so far. This is a masterclass in how to not only construct a bunch of shots and scenes that look absolutely stunning, but do it in a way that the flow and the pace is never broken throughout its entirety. I have genuinely watched this opening hundreds and hundreds of times at this point, and yet I'm still discovering new details in how this opening is actually constructed and how beautifully it's tied together. Take this little scene for instance. One of my favorite sequences in the entire opening is this long stretch of different shots that are seamlessly blended together entirely through the motion of its subjects and the different visual motifs that are within. You can probably easily notice how the background in these first two shots slowly slides to the left, and how the motion of Kizaru blends into Kuma, which blends into the Seraphim, which blends into Bonnie, all absolutely incredible on its own already. But then after a few more rewatches, I noticed something else tying these shots together as well. Look at how the pacifista beams in the background of this shot transition seamlessly into the light coming off of Kizaru. Then look at how that light transitions seamlessly into the sparks coming off of Kuma. Then look at how that light transitions into the sparks coming off of the Seraphim, and then the bubbles transitioning into the ocean with Bonnie. The closest metaphor that I can come up for with all of this is it's like a rapper who is just unrelenting in their bars. They just keep going, and they make it seem so effortless, tying all of their lyrics together in such a satisfying way. And I guess Ishitani is like the director storyboard wizard equivalent of that. I am not exaggerating. Rewatch this opening over and over again, and you will pick up on so many ways that Ishitani ties all of these scenes together. The way that she syncs up nearly every part of the song to little bits of animation and movement across the entire opening. It's craftsmanship that you rarely ever see in the anime industry. And what's even more impressive in these storyboards, maybe the most impressive thing of all, is that you are with it every step of the way. The way these shots are drafted and the way these scenes are composed flows so organically, despite literally every single frame here being packed with insane amounts of detail. In another creator's hands, in most creators' hands, having to work with this amount of content, with frames and sequences this densely packed, that would be an absolute nightmare. Very, very few people would even attempt such a thing. And yet Ishitani not only throws herself into it, she handles it with more grace and more expertise than the vast majority of directors out there could. This entire opening just feels like the loudest proclamation possible of what makes her so supreme. And her storyboarding work actually leads into another side to Ishitani that I've never really gotten to talk about, and yet it's something that I gradually gain more and more appreciation for with every new work that she releases. And it's her immaculate use of lighting and color. Like I mentioned before, Ishitani is someone who uses and cares about the lighting and coloring in her work so deeply that she literally draws it into her very storyboards. This is not a common thing, and yet it shows how far she's willing to go to really capture whatever mood or feeling that she wants in a particular scene. I think of the deep, overbearing reds in 10:15 that are blasted away by light at the end of the episode when Luffy lands his red rock. I think of the overwhelming explosion of light and color during the amazing Queen concert that literally becomes a music video mid-episode. I think of the light flares that Ishitani always expertly used for the flashiness and over-the-top nature that One Piece invites, and even became a lot more common in other One Piece episodes just because I think so many other directors liked the way that she used them. Even outside of really in-your-face examples like that, I've just always really loved how dynamic and interesting the colors feel in her stuff. Take a look at most anime that are coming out right now, even some other lesser One Piece episodes themselves, and they can very easily fall back into a very generic and neutral aesthetic that is easier to produce, yeah, but is also just a lot more boring to look at. And yet Ishitani takes it upon herself to make even lighting as simple as dusk or dawn into these really evocative colorscapes that bring out a certain mood in the scene. The way that Yamato's vision here of Luffy's dream has the dusk represent Gold Roger's era ending, while the dawn represents Luffy's era beginning. It's just so genius, and it actually reminds me a lot of another incredible director, maybe you've heard of this guy, known as Mamoru Hosoda, and ironically, it specifically reminds me of his work on One Piece Movie 6. That movie is not only incredibly gorgeous and animated by the most brilliant minds in the industry, but it specifically has a really impactful use of color that transforms a bunch of settings that could have looked a lot more generic and turns them into something truly special. It's looking at this newest opening then where you see Ishitani's proficiency in light and color basically get turned up to 11. I genuinely think that there are more colors in this opening than there are in the goddamn rainbow, and what makes it even more impressive is again how cohesive of a style it still feels throughout. You're shifting between all of these super contextually different scenes with wildly different color palettes, and yet Ishitani always knows how to rein it in where it never distracts you or feel out of place. Everything just works. But when it comes to all of that stuff, and when it comes to Ishitani's work on this newest opening overall, it's impossible to talk about it entirely without also discussing an animator named Masami Mori. Masami Mori has a massive role in this opening as well. If you're wondering why all of the characters and the drawings in the opening look like that, why they look so different from how the series ordinarily looks, this guy is the one responsible, and he has shared a lot of growth with Megumi Ishitani as an artist ever since she started working on One Piece. It's honestly hard to even separate the two of them at this point when you talk about Ishitani's work. Now, Masami Mori is an animator who had already made his mark in Toei animation even before Ishitani started working there. Check out his animation on Precure, check out his animation on the Doremi movie, even his freelance work outside of Toei animation. This guy is an unbelievable talent in the world of anime, and he happens to be one of my favorite animators. In fact, Sakugaburu tells me that he is my favorite animator. But it was with episode 957 of One Piece specifically that Ishitani and Masami Mori collided for the very first time to bring us the best directed and best animated scene that One Piece had ever had up to that point in the franchise. Right away, you could tell that these two styles really complemented each other in a way that elevated both of their talents even further. Ishitani's direction and beautiful storyboards with Masami Mori's loose and charismatic animation was a match made in heaven. But it was still ultimately a pretty small sequence, and we would have to wait another year before we could see the true potential of what these two could make together in episode 1015. If you weren't already aware, Masami Mori was actually responsible for almost the entirety of the first half of episode 1015. The Ace and Yamato stuff was essentially all him and looks absolutely incredible. But what's even more important to discuss here is that he was also responsible for the brilliant, dare I say iconic, Luffy Dream Sequence, where Luffy and Gold Roger proclaim their dreams at the same time over some of the most beautiful direction and storyboarding that I have ever seen in my entire life. And what I find most interesting about this sequence is, one, how stylistically different it is from the rest of the episode, obviously an intentional choice to distinguish Luffy's childlike wonder from the harsh realities of Onigashima. But two, what I find even more interesting than that is how stylistically similar it is to the most recent One Piece opening that we got just now. The pastel colors and lighting, the crisp and simple line art, Ishitani and Masami Mori created something here that I genuinely think went on to become the foundation for their work on Opening 26, and quite possibly even the new art direction that Egghead has taken as a whole. And you can see that even more prominently in their next collaboration on a music video for One Piece Film Red called Where the Wind Blows. Now, if you haven't seen this music video yet, what are you doing? Go watch it right now, and then come back with the realization that, again, Ishitani and Masami Mori are continuing to pursue this specific artistic vision even further. The painterly aesthetic, the use of less detailed character designs, the colors, the lighting, none of this is exactly one-to-one with the most recent opening, but it is very clearly a stylistic direction that keeps popping up in their work together. And Ishitani has even said herself on Twitter that she wouldn't even attempt directing animation that looks like this if it wasn't for having this super animator Masami Mori right by her side. These two are pushing creative boundaries together in a way that you rarely see in anime overall, let alone a long-running mega franchise like One Piece. And just like I said in that original Megumi Ishitani video, I keep hoping that eventually Toei Animation will stop giving these two small projects like openings and music videos and even individual episodes, and just let them unleash their talents on a much larger scale. The feeling that I get while watching Opening 26 of One Piece, more than anything else, is just this unparalleled ambition and talent that is almost breaking at the seams, ready to jump out into something much bigger. And with all of the connections that both of them already have in the industry, I truly do think that if they're not given an avenue to make bigger stuff that is outside of the franchise work that Toei is known for, they very well could end up leaving the studio altogether. And the reason I think that isn't just doom and gloom. I'm not trying to scare anybody here, but Toei in particular has one of the most notorious track records when it comes to exactly this sort of thing happening. Toei Animation is still the largest animation studio in Japan. They work on so many of the most popular franchises over there, and because of that, they naturally draw in incredible talent looking to work there, and end up birthing some of the biggest geniuses in the entire industry. Are you a fan of Kunihiko Ikuhara and shows like Penguin Drum or Revolutionary Girl Utena? Well, he got his start at Toei working on Sailor Moon. You like Takuya Igarashi and his works like Soul Eater, Ouran High School Host Club, or even the recent Bungo Stray Dogs? Well, before those, he helmed a 200-episode magical girl series at Toei called Oja Majo Doremi. How about a name that I mentioned earlier in the video, the legendary Mamoru Hosoda? Well known for all of his anime original films now, but before those, he was doing all kinds of work at Toei on Digimon, Kitaro, and even the best One Piece film to this day. From directors to animators to character designers, Toei is one of the largest birthplaces that you see all of these talented people pop up in. But it's also an almost inevitable conclusion that creators this talented and this ambitious in their works eventually grow out of Toei, because it's simply just not the kind of studio that allows the kind of creative freedom that they're looking for. Ikuhara didn't want to keep working with Sailor Moon, he wanted to make his own series. Mamoru Hosoda wanted to make his own movies. There's plenty of examples of this happening throughout its entire history, but there's one creator in particular that mirrors Ishitani almost one-to-one in a very uncanny, almost prophetic way, and her name is Rie Matsumoto. Rie Matsumoto is one of the most well-known directors in the anime industry. If you've watched Kekkai Sensen, if you've watched that one chocolate commercial, if you've watched that Pokemon music video that exploded a few years ago, you've seen some examples of her absolutely glorious work. And just like with Ishitani, it's funny how well-known she is within the community because she does have a relatively small portfolio of work. It really does just come down to how much of an impact that she left with all of her projects that people just started learning and remembering her name. However, before any of those projects, she was in a very similar position to Megumi Ishitani, getting her start in the animation business, working at Toei. And starting out, she was doing the exact same stuff. She was doing smaller work within the company, like directing individual episodes for various Precure anime. Now, Precure in the West isn't exactly the mega popular franchise that One Piece is, but in Japan, it is absolutely massive. And she definitely started establishing herself as one of the greats in the industry with her episodes on Precure. So much so that Toei eventually gave her the reins to direct a full Precure movie. Already, we're starting to get into a prophecy of sorts, and if this prophecy is something to be believed, I could definitely see Megumi Ishitani being given control of the next One Piece movie whenever they start making that happen. But what's more important to this story is what happened to Rie after this Precure movie came out. This is back when Toei Animation was winding down the number of original projects that they were making, but they did still greenlight a small handful of them from time to time, and Rie Matsumoto was actually given control of a completely original, from the ground up anime series known as Kyosogiga. And what's even more interesting to note is that she did this with somebody that she had already been working with closely in Toei up to this point, named Yuki Hayashi. Now, I'm not trying to overwhelm you with names and just staff within the industry. I know that's probably starting to get a little confusing, so just think of Yuki Hayashi as the Rie Matsumoto equivalent of Masami Mori, just this insanely talented animator and character designer who did share a lot of growth and a lot of work with Rie as they worked up within Toei. The two of them clearly elevated each other's works and each other's styles. They worked together on that Precure movie, and then they were eventually given the full control over this original series, Kyosogiga. But then they left. They left Toei Animation. These two creators who built their talents and contributed some of the best stuff that Toei has ever made left the studio to work together on other stuff that they found more creatively fulfilling. These two are still inseparable to this day, they're just working on different stuff now outside of where they began. Toei is just a studio that continues to become more and more single-focused on this franchise work, and that continues to drive out all of these insanely talented people who naturally are going to want to work on more personally driven, interesting projects. And I guess the point I'm trying to make with all of this is that Toei isn't even a studio anymore that would give Ishitani her own original series. I don't even know if Ishitani can get her own Kyosogiga at this point. And it's sad because she did direct a small original short called Jurassic a long time ago. This short was clearly indicative of a project that she wanted to make, and she might never get the chance to actually make it if she stays working at Toei. So when you watch something like One Piece Opening 26, when you watch an episode like One Piece Episode 1015, I think it's fine to appreciate them in the vacuum of One Piece. I love One Piece. It's one of my favorite anime series of all time. I feel so blessed seeing such incredible talent working on this series that got me into anime in the first place. But I also think it's important to look at these things with the bigger picture of these people who are working on them. This incredible opening, this love letter to the franchise, does not exist without Megumi Ishitani. It does not exist without Masami Mori. And even above my love for One Piece, the feeling that I continue getting watching their work is that this is a creative force of unparalleled proportions that are just waiting for their chance to unleash it in a grander form. And if they don't get that chance, I genuinely see a future where they end up leaving so that they can create those opportunities themselves. Because the last skill of Megumi Ishitani, the most important one of all, is that she truly has the ability to draw out the best qualities of whatever she's working with. It's not just One Piece, it's not Dragon Ball, it's nothing that she's worked on in the past specifically. Give this woman anything, and I guarantee it turns to gold. Join the Discord server in the description below and let me know in the comments what your favorite aspect about this opening is, because despite my focus on the pillars of Ishitani and Mori's roles bringing this to life, there's obviously a lot more to how something like this actually ends up being as good as it is. Something like the Kitadani song being absolutely incredible if you're a longtime fan of the franchise and his other openings, the assistant director Nanami Michibata who continues mentoring underneath Ishitani and growing their skills more and more, the many prolific animators like Vincent, Chris, Bahi JD, the DOP Naoyuki Wada. A lot goes into making something this incredible, and I do truly appreciate everybody who played a part in creating this. I also know that this video was more production oriented than anything else, but another big part of why this opening is so great is because of how full of insanely meticulous references and details within the arc that only a mastermind like Ishitani would even think of including. So if you want a video just diving into every single little tiny lore and narrative detail in here, I highly recommend watching my good friend Arthur's video on that as well, because there are some insane Easter eggs in here that I didn't even pick up on after hundreds of rewatches. At the end of the day, no matter where Ishitani goes in the future, no matter where Masami Mori goes in the future, I will of course be eagerly awaiting to see what they do next, because they just keep proving time after time that they are among the pinnacle of the industry. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you, and have a great day.